Okay. Hey, Cam. Hey, Sabrina. How's it going?
Hey, it's good.
Good. So happy to have you guys here. Um, it is currently Friday, August 28th. It's 4:32, sorry, 4:38. I'm a little dyslexic. I'm staring right at it, but the number two came out of my mouth. 4:38 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I am outside of LA right now. The two of you are in Oakland, right? Not together, but you both happen to be in Oakland right now.
Yeah, I'm in El Sobrante, but
Okay, cool.
really close.
I'm in the hills out here in Oakland.
Nice.
Yeah, and we just recorded a podcast the other day, so yeah, it's been dope being here
Awesome.
with Sabrina.
It's
Yes,
been
that's
great.
right. I know you guys just released their third episode together.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, but yeah, how about that? Sabrina, you go first.
Okay, I'm Sabrina Monarch of monarchastrology.com, and I'm an Aries sun, Taurus moon, Pisces rising like Kirah.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I've been practicing evolutionary astrology since 2012, and I love Pluto. I'm really excited to be talking about the outer planets with you. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Cam, how about you?
Yeah, hey everybody, Cameron here. And my sun is Aquarius, conjunct the North Node. My moon is Gemini, and my rising is Sagittarius. And I have been practicing astrology, man, for a really short amount of time, probably like 5 years now, maybe, not even. And yeah, my path with astrology has been really interesting because it's been like a combination of linear learning and like being stuffed in the back of an herb room, just like finding patterns with people in reality, like non-linear downloads as well. So I practice medical, evolutionary some, and then also been learning a lot more like Renaissance and like classical reading too, which has been fun.
Awesome. Yeah, and the three of us all went to Norwalk together. Well, we stayed together. We basically lived together during Norwalk last year, 2019, and I think that's when I met both of you for the first time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Cam looks frozen. Cam, are you with us? Okay, yeah. Just for a second.
I'm back.
Um, yeah, and that was just a very magical time the three of us had together. I guess we all were connected through Erin Shipley, all of our mutual friends, who I'm sure I'm going to have on the podcast at some point. But yeah, okay, thanks for sharing. So I guess all three of us are pretty mutable a little bit, right? We have the mutable
Yeah.
risings at least. Um, and yeah, what was I going to say? I don't, I just totally lost my thought. But what I wanted to ask you was where the outers show up in your chart. So, like for me, I have my sun is conjunct Pluto. I have a sun Mars Pluto conjunction. I have Uranus Neptune on my north node and also squaring. I have my moon is exactly like partile square Neptune, and my Venus is partile square Uranus. And they're opposite each other. So I have pretty significant contact with the outers. Also, my chart ruler Jupiter is trine Uranus as well. So that's my connection to the outers, and I would love to hear you guys. How about Sabrina? You go first.
Yeah. I have Pluto in aspect to a lot. It aspects my moon. I have a moon Pluto opposition, square my Saturn. It's trine my Mercury and Venus. And it's sextile Neptune, which it is for most people alive. And I feel like I'm missing something there, but I always feel like Pluto aspects everything. And then I have my sun squares my Uranus Neptune conjunction. And so I really, really feel the Uranus Neptune conjunction with like my love of the internet, for one
Yes.
thing. Yeah, square my sun. And then I also have, I think it's Uranus and Neptune. Both of them are quintile my Mercury, Venus.
Awesome. Love that.
Yeah,
How about you, Cam?
also funny stuff. Yeah, so I have Uranus conjunct the Ascendant. I have Uranus conjunct my Mars. I have Uranus opposing my Chiron. And then I have Uranus conjunct my Neptune, and now I'm going to go to Neptune. And I have Neptune opposing my Chiron, and Neptune conjunct my Saturn, and Neptune conjunct my Mercury and my Venus retrograde. And that Uranus and Neptune are both in Capricorn in the first house, and my Pluto is in the 11th house, and it's sextile my Saturn and my Mercury and my Venus. So I got a lot of
Damn.
stuff going on there. Got a lot of stuff going on there. Oh yeah, and
Yes.
Uranus is also opposing Jupiter as well.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Wow.
Oh
That's a
wait,
lot.
and Pluto is squaring my Sun and my North Node.
How did you forget that? Okay.
I know, right?
Yeah, and I guess like the reason that I wanted to, bring this up and like where it touches in our charts is because I find that people, astrologers in particular, who have like a significant contact to the outers, really, really resonate with them and kind of are like these conduits into the generational energies that the outers bring. So yeah, I wanted to, because like some people just have like Pluto in Scorpio like in a house that's not really aspecting much, and not to say that they aren't in tune with the generational energies, but I feel like people who have those like very intense contacts with the inner planets have a more, I don't know, we experience it more in our day to day. And I wanted to kind of start out by talking about the fact that both of you are more evolutionary astrologers. I definitely started out with a foundation that included evolutionary astrology, but tend to skew more traditional. And yeah, I mean, the different traditions treat the outer planets in different ways. And so I kind of wanted to start out by talking about the way that we, all three of us, use the outer planets, because it is probably pretty different. Um, so how we use it in our practices, just so people can kind of get an understanding as to how like different astrologers approach astrology differently, and even approach like using these planets differently. Um, I guess to start, I use the outers as, well, I guess the way I see the outers and I approach the outers is very much like they are a different category, different like class of planets than the the seven traditional planets that you can see with the naked eye. And yeah, I definitely use them. I think less so in natal, unless they do have that like contact with the sun or the moon, or another inner planet. I will 100% look at the transits. I think that you cannot ignore an outer planet transit. And that, yeah, I think I just treat them as like a different category, different class, that kind of their effects are very different than the inner planets, in my opinion, and that they, how do I say this, like it feels very like supernatural almost, and like you can't, in my opinion, like you can't remediate an outer planet transit. You kind of just have to experience it. Whereas like the inner planets, you can kind of like do some things for Mars or for Saturn or whatever to kind of like prepare, or even, like I said, remediate. Outer planet transits, in my opinion, are something that you just have to surrender to and experience, because they act differently. So, Cam, how about you? How do you use them in your practice?
Yeah. First of all, I want to say to everybody, like, being mindful when you're learning astrology, just like understanding the context that you're using things. So to start off with that, because I do use them differently depending on what I'm doing. Like right now, I'm in an intensive horror consultate or like class, so it's like I understand how to use it in the context of that. I use it in the context of medical. I use it in the context of natal, EA. So just like everybody being mindful, like we have to make sure that we like know what lens we're looking through to be able to use things in the proper way. And I just feel like that's important to start with. But mostly I like to start with medical. And from a medical perspective, you know, when they say the outer planets are like quote unquote transpersonal, the thing about that is when we have connections from the outer planets to inner planets, a lot of times what that represents in medical astrology is something that is beyond you, right? It's something that's beyond you. So since it's generational, we're speaking of generational on multiple lenses here. So we're speaking generational as far as what generation you're in, but also generational as far as like lineage goes. So if you have connections to your outer planets in your chart, it's like if I have something connected to my Neptune, like my inner planets connected to Neptune, in medical astrology, that could mean my parents had something going on with their health that came to me, and it's transpersonal in that way. So that's a big thing to think about when we're thinking about the outer planets. So I use that, and that's like super important because if somebody has like a Neptune connection, then it might be something with the lymphatic system, and we know the lymphatic system in the human anatomy is everywhere in the body, right? So let's take an inner planet, Venus, that rules the kidneys. That's like in a certain space in your body. But so like I said, that's personal because it's like in this one area. But then you take an outer planet like Neptune, and it's like everywhere. It's like consuming the whole thing. So that's just one reflection I'll give on that. And I'm curious to hear what you have to say, Sabrina.
Yeah, that thing about things that are beyond us, I've been thinking about that since I first heard you say that. So I always start natal chart readings with Pluto. Like Pluto and the lunar nodes is what I look at first. So that's how I learned how to read charts. But then when I started to interact with the broader astrology world, I realized that that was more unusual. So now it is just like fun to be able to offer that to people too. And it's like they've never gotten a reading where it's like Pluto is the first thing we go to. But Pluto gives the context for the soul's incarnate desire, like what's the reason for being here, and then reading the rest of the chart from that lens. But also I find that the outer planets each have these really magical teachings that come with them. So just by studying them, there's an expansion of consciousness that happens. And I'm glad that we'll get to go into all of them because there's just these like really beautiful metaphysical openings that I think can happen through contacting them. And I even like my, I have the Beginner's Guide to Evolutionary Astrology by Ari Moshe, and he makes the point in it that even if you just look at the picture of Neptune, you'll gain like a Neptune transmission. Like you can form union with the planet just by looking at a photograph of it. And I think that thoughts like that are kind of unusual and kind of magical. And I find that the outer planets open up so many different discussions about magic. And once you learn those things, you never look at life the same way. It like opens up doors that you didn't see before.
Oh my God, I have like full body chills. Hearing you say that. Yes, it is so magical. I mean, I guess let's get into it. Let's start talking about it. Uranus. Yeah, Uranus, the first of the outers. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to like talk about how, so you could think of the inner planets too as like things that are more conscious, we're more consciously aware of,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the outer planets are more unconscious dynamics, right? It was like the things that we don't see, right? Which is a perfect point to like traditional astrologers when I like first hear people say like, we don't see it, and that's important. Like it's the inner planets are important because we see them, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's very true. And I'm like, but actually, when it comes to like humans, it's like we're unconscious of the majority of our reality.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what actually like it fortified me in understanding that the outer planets are actually, in my practice, potentially more important because it's things that we don't see that are like influencing the reality that we do see. So just wanted to add that
Snaps
in.
to that. I love that. Yes, thank you for including that. It's very true. I mean, And that's kind of why I put them in a separate like category of planets, like because they act very differently and they are very unseen. Like you're not going to, like a Uranus like person's not going to walk through the door. I mean, I guess that could happen, but you know, we see like Venus embodied. We like, I just bought, you can see the flowers in the background. I just got back from buying flowers for Venus for an offering because I'm fasting and shit for Venus. But it's more.
I get to do it this morning, but I was like, I got into class and just got a little too far.
Sorry about that. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you're back. Yeah, I need to do something about this internet. What was I saying? Oh yeah. That the inner planets are more tangible. And the outers just kind of have this, very unseen, happening in the background sort of quality until they make these like, transits to your inner planets, and then you're like, oh shit, this is happening. I feel it. I'm experiencing it. So yeah, thank you for making that point. Okay, let's get into them. Uranus.
Ask your question. I have
Yeah.
no.
You're such a
If
Uranian person.
you can ever like get to this, but like I just want to ask, like from your lens, do you consider the outer planets to be malefic?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I think they can be experienced. I've definitely said that before, probably like, kind of jokingly, like because the experience of them can definitely feel malefic, 100%. But I don't think I would like qualify them as malefics as like Saturn and Mars are. Because again, I just can't look at them in the same context of the other planets. They're out of this world. That's like my favorite way to describe them. They're out of this world. So anyway, can we go into Uranus now? Okay. I wanted to talk about like the myths around Uranus. I think in particular, I personally am not one that knows a lot about the myths. But the myth of Prometheus really is one that stands out, reading Richard Tarnas's Cosmos and Psyche and like hearing him talk about that myth of Prometheus and how like we probably should be calling Uranus Prometheus. How like that's really the mythological sort of archetype that it corresponds with the most. Do either of you want to kind of talk about that myth?
Yeah, I think about that one a lot with Uranus. Being that it's like Prometheus taking fire from the gods and bringing it to the mortals, and there's this sense of liberation and like freedom of information that can come through with Uranus. And I think that this can happen on a societal level and an individual level. And the societal level is when someone's really innovative and they get, either celebrated for this information that they're bringing, or punished in some way by society that can't, because Prometheus gets like chained to a rock and like has his liver eaten out by vultures for eternity. We don't talk about that.
Day. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's like this glamour of being Promethean and also this like hard price that comes with it. And I think that the individuation path has that, where it's like you have a liberating experience that separates you from the known. You come back to your community and tell them about it, and they exile you. They're just like, you can't, we're not good with this. But then on the inner level, I think that there's a quality of integrating highs and lows that Uranus can help us with. And if we don't have that integration, then we can have maybe like mania or experiences of being erratic, versus like where does that transmission of like information from up on high get integrated down to earth in some way. And so I like to think of the myth of Prometheus, like not super literally, but more metaphorically in terms of also that fear that we have about being different or being innovative and what will happen because of that.
Yeah, I love that. Mark Jones's book, which one was the first one? The Soul Speaks, or yeah, The Soul Speaks, right? That was his
That may have
first
been
one,
the second one,
or is
but
it Healing the
Healing the
Soul?
soul, healing the soul.
Is it okay? I always get them confused. Whatever the first one was. And he talked about the myth of Prometheus and how there is this association with Uranus to trauma because of like the fact that by individuating, he was punished for eternity. And there's this pain to it, and there's this trauma associated with it. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's something that I think about a lot when it comes to Uranus. And how, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Mark Jones who kind of talks about Uranus as being this like web of connection between us, but in particular having to do with information, in that like it's kind of associated with our like collective memory. And yeah, I don't know, I think about that a lot, especially in regards to like the internet, and like, yeah, how there's just like this web of information that we can kind of like tap into. Yeah, Cam, what do you have to say about Uranus?
Yeah, so anytime I talk about Uranus, I definitely talk about like the subtle mental trauma piece, and I try to like keep it specific with saying like subtle mental trauma, and then I also always bring in like saying the word fragmentation, because it does have to do with like fragmentation. Like when it comes to subtle mental trauma, there's just, I think inherently as humans, we come into this life and we feel whole, like some sense of wholeness. And like Sabrina was saying, when we don't feel like we can individuate, then there's parts of ourselves that we leave in other places. So that's the type of like fragmentation that Uranus can bring. And it also does have that piece of liberation. So I also look at Uranus, it could be as like authenticity, right? So it's like you have this spectrum, the Uranian spectrum of like, I walk into a situation, I am different. I can be super authentic and in my own individual nature, or I can fragment pieces of myself and allow myself to feel like my nervous system activation, because I don't feel like I can bring my full self in this moment and be present with my own unique individual blueprint, like an electrical blueprint too. It's like even thinking of it being a co-ruler of Aquarius in that way, it's like, yes, Saturn's there because there's a structure, right? Like we all have our physical body, but then outside of that, we all do have an electrical structure outside of it. So that's that co-rulership where it's like you get into somebody's energy field and you feel the electricity that they bring into a room. And yeah, that can bring sudden shifts for people, right? Like you can say something that I got a download, a flash of lightning, an insight, and I say it to you, and you feel the electricity, and that forever like shakes and it makes a sudden shift. Yeah.
Yeah, never the same after Uranus. I love that.
Right. Or it could come to your angle, and subtle mental trauma could come up from like 5 lives ago. Like that's potential, right? Like, or I also the other day I wrote it down. It's like the sudden shift of Uranus could be luck or fuck. Like it could be like it's like whatever it is, it's just like erratic, and it just like throws in something that you just didn't know was coming.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you guys had any like recent like Uranus, or maybe not even recent, but like transits or something, like activations of Uranus that you can speak to?
Yeah, I had Uranus conjunct my sun.
Oh, yes, because I
And
have
that
Moon.
actually, yeah, that transit coincided with so many things, like becoming an astrologer. As it was building, it also coincided with starting to see these lights that look like stars that help me think and write. So they're just like these blue lights, like they're very Uranian in some sense.
Yes. Oh,
So that happened. Um, I definitely changed, like flipped, became like a whole different person. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I had it on my moon because our sun and moon are almost conjunct, right? A couple degrees away. My moon's
What's
at
your degree?
14.
Oh, yeah. Aw. 2 degrees away.
Okay. Is your sun at 12 or 16?
16.
16. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I had it on my moon, and that was a lot of upheaval in my life, especially in regards to like my living situations. And I say situations because during that whole time I was like just bouncing around Brooklyn for a couple years, and my mom got really sick around that time too. Pretty suddenly, actually. She has kidney disease, and I have the same disease as her, and she had a transplant, like, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 years prior. Probably like 5 years or so prior. And everything was okay, and then all of a sudden she just started to get really sick. And so that was really like a Uranus transit to my moon. And while Uranus transited my moon, it was during the Pluto Uranus square, which Pluto was on my North Node, like on my Uranus. It was also opposed in my Venus. A lot of stuff happening. But something more recent that I wanted to bring up was, Uranus in Taurus, which is in my third house. There was the first Sun Uranus conjunction in Taurus in, I guess, April or May of 2019. And, also happened to coincide with Jupiter transiting my midheaven in Mercury. But that conjunction, that Uranus Sun conjunction in my third house, I got an email asking me to write a book. So I got my book deal
Yes.
from that. And then even more recently, this 2 weekends ago when we hosted Fresh Voices, I that was when Uranus stationed retrograde, and it's stationed in this like exact trine to my natal Uranus and North Node, also trine my Jupiter. So I was kind of looking forward to that. And what happened was, well, I hosted this like, awesome summit, but on top of that, something very random and mundane. Chris Brennan DM'd me and was like, "Hey, what type of mic are you using?" This was like during the summit. And I was like, "A Blue Yeti, why?" And he's like, are you sure that it's like plugged in correctly? Like you sound kind of like a little far away. And he's like, which side of the mic are you speaking into? He's like, you should be speaking into the side with the logo. And I was like, like literally like mind blown moment, because I turned my mic around and then my sound just got like 80 times better. And I just felt like I told Chris, I'm like, "Chris, this is so like Uranus stationing in my third house, like all the things." So that was another really random, like small thing, but just the fact that like it really kind of shifted things into alignment for me. I'm doing this podcast, like I'm using this mic a lot, and I was using it incorrectly for so long until I had this like third house Uranus activation, and it all got clearer. How about you, Cam?
Yes. So I have one that like was specifically tied to my whole sign house chart. So when Uranus went into my sixth house, like within like a week or so, and this was the first time it happened, like before it retrograded out, like when it first came in, like a week after it, I was reading this book by this guy named Arnold Earhart, and it was like talking about mucusless diet or whatever, and I really like had salmon like falling out in my kitchen, and this book was talking about how like humans are supposed to eat all fruit or something like that. It was some like really extreme kind of diet, and my whole body just shook. And then for the next 5 months, I ate all fruit. That was
Fruitarian.
like, yeah. So I was like, and that's when we met at like Norwalk, I was still like on that wave.
I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
only
just, like
fruit.
all fruit, and yeah, that was an interesting experience because like I always like to rebel against stuff with my Uranus rising ass. And so just even like thinking about the sixth house and how people say it's the house of illness, like me trying to like show a reflection of like actually it was like a house of health type of thing going on there. And it was, but I also had to come to terms with the truth was that was really difficult. And I was like really working myself hard. And I was kind of like a slave to that like diet. So like even like the reflection from my perspective of being more like evolutionary and like we create our own reality, it's like I did create my own reality. And at the same time, the whole sign system still actually worked. And it was like that was tough. And it put me through a lot of stress, like physically, even though I came out like feeling amazing and like way better.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. You're eating a shit ton of cantaloupe.
Yeah, there was a point in time where I had like 3 weeks of all cantaloupe.
Yeah.
I was
No,
like, worried about me.
I've had friends who've done that too. And yeah, have done like the whole like completely fruit. And it's funny because the way like you literally change, like when people eat only fruit for a long time, their eyes get brighter and they start to like glow and buzz, and like it's this very intense, yeah, I don't know, it's like getting thrown into like a car wash or something, coming out like bright and sparkling clean, and it's like kind of buzzing. But yeah, that's a really good one into the sixth house.
Was it Uranus and Taurus at that time?
Mm-hmm.
So that's like, yeah, like food and
Yeah, that makes
yeah,
sense too.
extreme.
Yep.
Yeah,
I had a cool experience the day that Uranus ingressed into Taurus that involves food.
please tell us.
So I was making dinner for my friend's birthday, and I went to the store to get some curry powder, and I was in the spice aisle, and as I was looking at all the spices, and it was like this whole wall of spices in front of me, I got extended, like maybe 1 minute long, like full body chills that felt like ecstasy. Like it was like
Oh
this
my
like
God.
Kundalini experience in the grocery store. And I was just like, oh my God, this is Uranus and Taurus. Like that's what I thought
Yes.
immediately, because it was just so potentially mundane that I was at the store to get spices to make dinner, but it turned into this like magical like Kundalini experience.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That's so great. Yeah, looking at spices, like flavor your food. I love that. Um, so how about like Uranus in a natal chart, and especially like if it's conjunct an angle or a luminary or another like important planet, maybe like a chart ruler or something. How does that tend to show up? And you can kind of pick any placement too if you don't want to talk about it generally. Either of you can go.
Oh, okay. Cool. Got you. Yeah. So the first thing I always look at with that, I always go to medical astrology first, no matter if I'm doing just a natal chart reading. I would tend to look at the electrical system of somebody's body and maybe how they're having like their circulation is, because it being co-ruler of Aquarius, it would be opposite of Leo, and Leo is the heart, and that it just works on circulation. Those two opposites work on circulation. So it's like, how is this person's vital force moving through their body? Like I want to know that because that gives me other like nonlinear information that is not really astrological that much. But I also look at it for the potential subtle trauma signature. So if it's in connection to Venus, then I'm like thinking, how are these people in their relationship? Like, does this person fragment parts of themselves when they enter in relationships? And can they bring their authentic?
Reading me to filth, Jesus. Oh, you are so you're so Uranian. Sorry.
Okay, good. Good. Yeah, okay, so that's like one reflection. And then and then there's like other planets and other significations. It's like, does someone fragment themselves from, and it's like fill in the blank. What does represents the sun to you? What represents Mars to you? What represents Jupiter to you? And just like fill in that blank, and then seeing, and also highlighting like what house it's in more than what sign it's in, right? To make it more specific to that person. Because I know a lot of times people are like, well, it's been in this sign forever. And I'm like, yeah, cool, but everybody has it in their chart somewhere. So, and it's in a house. So pay attention to the house. Also gives a lot of information. Like, I'll give an example. Uranus in the second house, a lot of times people who have Uranus in the second house, it's like a tendency to either like do something about like touch. It's like something about touch, and they like really desire and crave touch, but they have a tendency to stay back away from it because on some of they want it so bad. So yeah, that's how I work with it.
How about you, Sabrina?
So there's certain, like all of the planetary combinations have different, feels to me. Like Uranus Sun could represent someone who like really needs to express themselves in this like individuated, unique kind of way. And I can see that as like, depending on the aspect, like if it's a hard aspect or conjunction, a sense of being like more prone to separate from their culture or their family and want to innovate within that. And so they can get the feedback from the world around them that they're weird or something like that. And so there's going to be that like personal, like their own essence is really tied up with their individuation. Venus, Uranus, I think of with like the fling or relationships that happen quickly or like burn brightly, or someone that wants like unconventional relationship structures or just wants to be with people who are weird in some way. I tend to feel Uranus like light up in a chart once I've gotten to know someone more. So I've noticed like in a one-time reading, I have a different experience than if I'm working with someone over time. And Uranus is like really like, it can be a trauma signature. So it's getting to know their life story or what happened in their childhood. And then, Uranus pops out a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like I have a lot of people in my life who have Uranus on the ascendant.
Yeah.
Either Capricorn or Sag rising. And I see these people as super like, I mean, they have to be an individual. It's really difficult, I think, for these people to ever fully or at least feel like they're assimilating in some way. It's like very important for them to feel like they are their own person, and even if they are associated with some sort of group, it's like almost like very it's like having like a turtleneck that's too tight or something. It's like not really wanting to
I like that image.
not really wanting to like fully belong to anything that is not themselves. So yeah, there's this very individual streak to them. And yeah, I mean, I think like when it shows up in a chart, there's just, I mean, like we've been saying, like this need to individuate and not I guess like it's almost like always expecting change with wherever that that planet is concerned. So like with like Moon Uranus, um, it's really difficult to feel comfortable with things that are consistent and constant. It's like always really wanting to like change things up at some point. Like comfort is instability in a way, or instability is comfortable for some of those people. And so, yeah, I don't know. Anything? What else comes up for you guys when we're thinking about Uranus?
Just because you said something about like remediation techniques, and that's something I've really, really, really been loving doing and working with people with. So even just as an open invitation, anybody go onto YouTube and type in electromagnetic yoga and then do a practice like that for 40 days and then tell me that you can't feel the electromagnetic field of your body and other people's more heightened than you did before. And if that happens, then I will literally take you under my wing and show you myself after that. Because like that to me, like that's a remediation for you. Also any kundalini or any yoga practice that you do that works on the quote unquote aura is actually building up your nervous system. So, and these are just great practices to have when it comes to remediating Uranus energy. And I also would say something that's way more unlike me to say a lot of times, but it's like with progressions, if you pay attention to progressions on top of a natal, on top of transit, one can understand when to say things to people that might be very impactful and like how it can land really nicely. Like how it won't get, like it won't be too shocking to them. If you can like see transits and progressions and like you just like lay that lightning bolt in a space that it can like land like comfortably. That's something that I've found over time, and I've just getting that through my own trial and error process. But just another little, perspective too.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Uranus transits, maybe we should talk about that. Like, what I would always tell people, and especially, I mean, these people, you have a Taurus moon, Sabrina, but like Taurus risings, especially people with, Taurus placements, I've been approaching it very carefully because Taurus placements really are adverse to change, especially sudden change. And so, yeah, it's like I've been having to, counsel a lot of people through the fact that they're moving through these really intense Uranus transits. I had someone yesterday who was a Taurus rising, 10 degrees, 41 minutes or something, exactly where Uranus stationed 2 weeks ago, and where it's just hanging out for like 3 months straight. Excuse me. And yeah, there's a sense of just like really needing to just allow those electrical currents to move through you. And it's so uncomfortable. Like, I mean, Sabrina, you had it on your sun. I've had it on my moon. It's not comfortable at all. And Taurus especially, Aries is one thing, but Taurus especially is like, needs that sense of comfort and stability. And so if you do have a Taurus placement out there and you're experiencing a Uranus transit, or you're going to, just know that like it's not forever, for one, but two, Uranus is really just wanting to liberate you from whatever has been, or whatever's not working anymore. Basically, it's like Uranus is really shaking the ground beneath you, and kind of like, anything that falls away was meant to fall away. And when I think about Uranus transit, I think about an upgrade. Like Uranus really is just trying to like upgrade stuff, and it does it in just a really semi-destructive, but also, it doesn't really wait for permission. It's just like, I'm here, let's do this. And so just knowing that while you might be in it right now, especially those of you with 10-degree fixed, or anywhere around between like 6 and 10 degrees, you might be feeling it right now, but know that, what with Uranus, the thing to not do is to clutch on and try to like hold on to something. Do you guys have any advice for people moving through Uranus transits right now?
Totally. Like, I think that Uranus and Taurus can be about like somatic or body awakening. So, like, having a new relationship with embodiment. And there's like a rising kind of field of embodiment, I feel like. And I'm just thinking about like a friend of mine who's a Taurus who has like Uranus right on her sun, and that, you know, like the other day I was in like an anxiety loop and I was like, I'm freaking out. And she was like, let it like move through your flesh. And we like ran
Wow.
around and like screamed in the kitchen. And we're just like so weird. We danced. She like guided me through this like dance ritual. And then like later we're sitting on the couch and I'm like, I'm still in it. And she's just like nodding at me like all peaceful. And she's like, this is good for you. This is an initiation.
Oh my God.
And I look at her, you know, going through this transit, and it's like, she's so vibrant and like her world is so Uranian, but it's in this Taurus style, you know? She makes epic food, dances, does like deep soul work through embodiment and dance, and like guides people. And there's something, you know, always moving through her.
I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that too.
Do you have anything to add, Cam?
Yeah, I would say revolutionary upgrades to one's individual perspective on what they value inside of themselves deeply, so deep that it like, it lands in the body. So just even doing yeah, somatic body work is just really, really good. And I also think of Taurus ruling like the neck area and like closer to the ears. So something about listening just feels really important. Like listening to our body, and knowing what to do in every single moment, and like waiting for that flash of insight to come through listening deeply to like our primal senses, to like our deep desires, our essential needs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm all about it. I love that. Yeah, I mean, I tend to kind of describe a Uranus transit as feeling as if you're sitting on an electric chair and like it just kind of emits these like low voltage zaps. And sometimes they're like a little bit more intense than the last one, but you don't know what's going to come. And so there's this feeling of just kind of like needing to jump out of your skin almost. It really does feel like you're being like electrocuted almost in a very like cosmic way. Um, yeah, and I guess I hope this is helpful for anyone moving through a Uranus transit, and that just know that like there's a way to kind of let it move through you, and like allowing the stuff to kind of change you on a very cellular level too. I think that's what all the outers tend to do, is they really kind of change you on a very like primal cellular level. And know that it's not forever, and that you're kind of getting a lot of downloads too. That's another thing with Uranus. There's a lot of just like flashes of insight, which you guys have spoken on, that come through with Uranus transit. So being open to receiving that, and you don't really have to look for it. Like it'll come. Yeah, I don't know. You
Something that
guys.
came through to me too. I just came through. It was just like
Mm-hmm.
allow Uranus, like invite Uranus to fragment parts of yourself that don't need to belong anymore. Like that don't resonate with you anymore. Allow those things to be fragmented away
Mm-hmm.
from you so that you can find more authenticity.
Yes, authenticity is the name of the game for sure with Uranus. Okay, how about Neptune? Um, I don't know. Are there any myths? I mean, I'm sure there are myths associated with Neptune, but I'm curious if you guys how you think of it mythologically, if you do.
I don't have like a myth, but I have like a kind of, I don't know what it would be called. Like it's some kind of like spiritual teaching that goes along with Neptune.
Yes, please share.
So it's this concept that there is source, or God, or however you want to name it. And then all these other temporary ephemeral things. So there's the eternal and the ephemeral. And that we all come from the eternal and we're all headed back there some way. And on the way, we have all these experiences and we merge temporarily with ephemeral things, just as our bodies are also ephemeral and our identities are ephemeral. And that we'll have this way of getting really attached to temporary things to the point of mistaking them for God. So we'll be in a relationship and it becomes God, or money becomes God, like whatever it is that we're obsessed with or fixated on. And then through that, we become like delusional because we're thinking that ultimate satisfaction is going to come from something temporary. And then we'll get disillusioned or feel feelings like despair. So I think that Neptune, like learning that for me, changed my life because I had never really thought of that concept of like, oh, like you can make a de facto God out of something temporary, worship it, do ritual with it, and all the while like not knowing that you're kind of setting yourself up for this massive despair,
Mm-hmm.
versus when you go into life knowing that, you're looking toward the eternal and merging temporarily with temporary things. It's a much different experience of life.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah, snaps to that. Cam, do you
Love
have
it.
anything to add to that?
I love that so much. That's what I want to add first. But yeah, I would definitely second that strongly. And also just the perspective a lot of times from like a traditional perspective too, how they say it's like illusion, delusion. And I like to say that Neptune's not causing that. That's what we have. Like we are the ones that like have an illusion and delusion, and Neptune is the great dissolver, right? So it's like dissolving those illusions and those boundaries in our mind that we think this is this, and I emotionally identify with it. And Neptune is a tsunami. So it's just like washing that away with like no care in the world about it. And I guess that's an outer planet thing too. It's like not even really worrying about us. It's just like, what is the ultimate truth? And the ultimate truth will be what it is. And if I wasn't in alignment with that, then I get disillusioned. And I had an illusion and I was delusional. So yeah, just to add to that in that way.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I see Neptune as the principle, like you said, like of dissolving of tsunami. Like I love how you said tsunami, but like what Neptune does is it just dissolves all boundaries. It really makes it kind of dissolves us back down to the fact that we're all a bunch of atoms. We're all just a bunch of molecules like stuff together. But when we really when we look at it, when we get down to like the molecular details, it's like there is no separation. We're all connected. And that's what I think Neptune represents. It's this sense of being connected with everything. Sort of like when you like first time I, tripped, that's like that was like the overwhelming feeling, was that like I like extreme complete connection with all that is, all that ever has been, all that will be. And that I feel like is very Neptunian. That was also, I think, like Neptune transiting my ascendant. Falling deeply, madly in love with people who I should not have been falling in love with, because everyone, I just saw the beauty and like the God in everyone. And I feel like that's what Neptune very much does and is. It really just like, yeah, completely just dissolves any sense of separation. And I've seen, like, I guess, to kind of talk about Neptune transits a little bit, like that can be either really beautiful and magical and surreal, but it also can be so terrible. It can be really, really scary and overwhelming. I think overwhelming is probably one of the top like words for a Neptune transit, or even like a natal Neptune like aspect. It's like you can experience this. We need to be able to feel separate from other people and places and things, for most, like, just to like be a human being. And so when that sense of separation is like dissolved and not there, you feel everything and you experience everything all at once. And that can be a lot, especially if you're going through like a Neptune moon transit or a Neptune sun transit, or on your ascendant, which, Sabrina, did it reach your ascendant yet?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we've both been through that. Oh, what a time. Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys have to say about that?
I think it,
go ahead, Sabrina.
oh yeah, I mean, I just agree. Like it can be such a beautiful transit, and it can also be so difficult. Just especially if something that you really believe in seems to like disintegrate before you. It has like, it can create like an existential crisis, or feeling abandoned by God or exiled from paradise. Like it brings up like deep suffering. And I think that Neptune transits can take a lot of time afterwards to make sense of, because the initial impact of it isn't just, even like with Uranus, it's like such a dramatic thing, and maybe there's trauma and stuff afterwards too. But I feel like with Neptune, there's a fog, kind of like sea fog, and you're just like not sure what exactly happened.
Yeah.
And it takes time to kind of like snap out of the spell, You could be like, that person was the love of my life. And, 10 years later, you're like, they were such an asshole. What was
They weren't shit. That is so true. I like so wholeheartedly agree with that. The fog aspect of it is really important to talk about, because it does kind of creep in, and it's like it's not so foggy all at once. It's very, very like, your senses just become a little bit more muted, and or even more extreme, but it happens on such a slow, yeah, it just kind of drifts in and then kind of takes over and then drips out, and you're like, what? I can see again somehow, but
Yeah.
everything is not as rosy as it was before.
Creeps in is like the right word.
Even like the discovery of Neptune. I don't remember the exact dates or anything, but I remember it was one of those things where, two different people like saw it at like, it was discovered by like two different people at the same time, I think, something like that, where there's just sort of this like now you see me, now you don't sort of weirdness with Neptune's discovery. I wish I could remember more about it. I should have looked that up, but yeah, there's this, it's like called the windy planet because it's like has constant storms on it. And it's just this like beautiful blue gaseous giant that's just like, I don't know, very, very nebulous. I guess I'll just throw that word out there. That's like the Neptune word that all astrologers use. Do
Yeah.
you have thoughts on that, Cam?
Yeah, I've experienced it that way myself, and I've seen a lot of other people experience it that way. I also will say, I'll often think about like a diffuser, like how the essential oil is like in a drop, but then when you diffuse it, it's just in so many different places, you can't really like, it's like you were saying something about how it's fog, but it's kind of like not always thick fog. It's kind of just like hazy to the point where you like think you know what you see, but you don't. Whereas like when it's like deep fog, you just don't, you don't know, right? It's like I'll think of it that way. And I also think about being drunk. I just think about being like super drunk. And I always tell people like on this spectrum of Neptune, like you could be drunk off spirit, like going to the bar and getting drunk off spirit, or you could just be like somebody who's like super spiritual and you're just like drunk off spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like out there like everything is one, and that's like it's like yeah, that's true, but also you're drunk.
Yeah, you're not seeing things clearly. Yeah, that is so
It's
true.
funny, like I had Neptune on my Mars, and there were many times where I think I was like belligerently drunk. Like even if people were like, you're being kind of delusional, I was like, no, I'm not, and I'll prove it to you. And I was just like, so we're just like willingly going into questionable life decisions with this like ardor.
Yeah.
And I
Oh,
don't
wow.
regret it. I really don't regret it in retrospect, but I don't think if I wasn't having a Neptune Mars transit, I would have so bombastically made hazy decisions.
Yeah, when Neptune entered my first house, when it entered Pisces in like 2011, I think it was, that's when I started smoking cannabis every day. That's when I, started and like life just sort of became so magical. I just remember like, listening to the Beatles and like smoking after work and being like, wow, like everything is so, that's when astrology really became like, very loud and everything. That's kind of when I kind of started to become more spiritual. And with that was a lot of pain and suffering and X, Y, and Z. But it's kind of like, but you get both with Neptune. You get that like overwhelming beauty and feeling of just like love for everything, especially the natural world. I think that's like, I had a reading with Sam Reynolds a couple months ago, and he's like, oh, you have the fairy princess aspect. And I was like, what? And he's like, it's Venus Neptune aspects. And when you he said it as like, when you're watching one of the Disney princess movies, yeah, Disney princess, not fairy princess, Disney princess movies, it always opens up with that princess like interacting with nature in this very like magical way, and they're like singing to the trees, and like the birds are flying around them, and that's very Neptunian to me. It's like just this experience of oneness with the world, especially the natural world. Which brings me to another point. I just moved to LA, and my astrocartography line, I have my Neptune Ascendant line is over here in LA. I'm a little bit like south of it, but like my ascendant here in LA is 16 Capricorn and my Neptune's at 14 Capricorn. So it's kind of close. And oh my God, it's like literally driving in here, there was this huge fire. It was the Apple fire. And we were like kind of driving towards it for a long time. And the sky just like slowly got darker and darker, and like, you know, like not fog, but smoke. And I was like, okay, this is getting weird. And then it finally cleared, and it cleared when we were like rounding some sort of like, I don't know, we were on the highway, but we got to this point where all of a sudden it got bright, clear sky after the smoke, and there was this huge mountain, and it was just like, oh, so gorgeous. And then, you know, I got over here to the suburbs a couple of days later, and I'm walking around talking to my friend on the phone. All of a sudden, and I'm in like, you know, literal suburbs, like there's, you know, houses and streets and shit. All of a sudden I look over and there's a baby deer just standing in the middle of the street. And it was
Oh,
literally like a baby, and it was all alone. We just stared at each other for a while. And then it started to walk, and I crossed the street so it could walk that direction it was walking in and not be afraid of me. And then I watched it kind of go behind a tree a little bit. And I'm waiting for it to like come out the other side, and it never did. It just literally disappeared. And I was like, oh, I guess this is like what living on my Neptune line is like little magical like beings popping up and then like just disappearing. And yeah, very, very, I'm like, okay, I can fucks with this. I kind of like this Neptunian vibe that I have over here.
oh, I love that.
um yeah, so how about like Neptune in a birth chart, and maybe someone has like Neptune on their ascendant, which, you know, a lot of our Cap rising friends will have that too. Yeah, do you guys have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, the first thing I think about when I think of Neptune on the ascendant is like, where's Saturn at? You know,
Hmm.
I'm just gonna automatically pair with that because I'm trying to find a way to invite this person to find as many boundaries as they can because of the diffusive energy, and also just from a medical perspective, the lymphatic system. And if the lymphatic system gets stagnant and it tends to make people feel foggy. So that's something to think about, right? Like we can feel foggy during a Neptune transit, but also just on a simple practical level, if your lymphatic system is stagnant, you will be foggy. Feel like you can, yeah, think clearly. So that's something important to think about. And then also, my friend Anna, I was talking to her the other day, and she called it like being psychically porous. So it's
Hmm.
just like being open in that way. I think of that and like how I can help people to not be so much in that way. So I guess that brings in Saturn again there. So I think that's what I focus on most when it comes to that, unless somebody brings up something that is inherently Neptunian. So other than that, I just look at, yeah, from that perspective for the most part going into the reading.
Hmm. Yeah, how about you, Sabrina?
I think about Neptune in aspect to the luminaries, so either the sun or the moon, and there is that porousness, and something that has kind of confused me with that, my correlations with it is that it is often people who are spiritual or, you know, can gain information in a kind of nebulous, porous way. But there's also a lot of correlation I've noticed with Neptune in aspect to the luminaries of like really difficult or even abusive childhoods. And I don't I don't totally get it. I'm like reading this book. I read a lot of things about being your higher self and spiritual growth and things like that. And one of the passages was like, talking to people who are spiritual and who are psychic, and it's like you may have incarnated into a family that, and they're describing something really chaotic, and it's like you incarnated into that family to, like, I don't know, learn some spiritual lesson or la la la. So I don't, maybe I haven't figured like my own theory on it, but just why I see that correlation so frequently with Neptune and the luminaries is really curious to me.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
can speak to that, I think.
Yeah, I'm
So,
curious.
yeah, so when you're in a family where a lot is going on and there's chaos, you feel overwhelmed, and that's Neptune. And then once you're overwhelmed, you will attune yourself to the psychic frequency of everything around you to where you stop thinking about yourself because your energy is so scattered. So there's a sense of like hopelessness that it brings too. It's like a sense of hopelessness. So since you don't have hope inside of yourself on some level, your energy is just like leaking everywhere, making sure that everything's okay around you. And that, yeah,
Oh,
so it's become very psychic when that happens. And sometimes people can't bring it back to like solidity, which is why I also think it's like super important for us to be mindful when we go too far to the spiritual, or when people are being too far to the other side and being like really material and practical on an excessive level, because somewhere in between there, like there has to be people who understand these experiences so that they can help remediate and modulate those things. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. Um, I've seen, I think with like a lot of my friends who have Neptune on the ascendant, and I'm even thinking like, obviously there's Gen Z too, who has, Neptune and Uranus and Aquarius, just even a lot of the younger, like Aquarius risings will have this. I just remember my cousin has this. And yeah, I think something I've heard a lot from people is like, life is psychedelic. Like a lot of people with like strong Neptune aspects don't drink or don't do drugs or, smoke, because it's like, I don't need to enhance what already is. Which when you were saying earlier about that, like some technique on YouTube, I was like, oh no, I could not do that because I'm already way too tapped in. Way too tapped in that I'm like, oh my God, that would probably kill me. Um, but yeah, I think with a lot of like Neptunian people, you get that, this sense of like, they already see life in a very like kaleidoscopic, like psychedelic way. Cause, you know, yeah, it's like that magic fairy pixie dust is just like all over the place. I see that a lot with people with Neptune on the midheaven too, or like in the 10th house. It's like raining down pixie dust on you. And that's kind of, yeah, I don't know. That's just like an image that comes to mind. It's really also being like when it's up there in the 10th house or in the midheaven, it's like being known for having that effect on people, or for like bringing the juju, bringing the magic to things. um and yeah, I think anyone with Neptune on an angle, especially ascendant or midheaven, will kind of have that sort of like, you bring that fog, you bring that magic into spaces. And yeah, I think with it, like Neptune conjunct the luminaries, or even in other aspects to it, there is this sort of like, I mean, yeah, need for boundaries, because it does just like make you wide open. It kind of does disperse your energy in that way. And so it's like, which is like, very, it can be very painful and difficult to deal with. But it also is very much a gift, when you can figure out how to work with it. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm always thinking about my moon square Neptune. It's like very, very, it's partile, it's exact, and it does operate on such like a behind the scenes sort of level, which is just Neptune in general. Like it's always kind of just like in the background. But it's hard for me to kind of figure out how it shows up often. I think, well, I don't know. I don't want to talk about myself too much, but yeah, I think another thing to kind of keep in mind with Neptune is that when you are experiencing a Neptune transit, it's going to last a couple of years. It's not just like a one and done sort of thing, because Neptune moves so slowly. It'll only go through like 3 to 5 degrees a year or something like that. Like its retrogrades are slow. It just moves so slowly. And so, yeah, I mean, I've been dealing with Neptune square my Mercury for the past like 2 or 3 years. And I'm almost done with it. I know it's stationing exactly square my Mercury to the minute in November. And then I can like wait for the fog to clear. I probably won't be able to see or think clearly for another year or two, but looking forward to that transit completing. Yeah, do you guys have any advice for people moving through Neptune transits?
Yeah, one thing I'll say, and I always say when it comes to Neptune, and I feel like we just don't get told this in our society, and I'm always about deconditioning not only astrology, but everything in general. But it's like, it's okay to not know, right? So it's like sometimes when we think we're confused, we're choicefully confused because we don't have to be confused. We can admit that we don't know. And when we admit that we don't, we can maybe figure it out in an easier way. And we can figure it out in a way where we can be more compassionate with ourselves. Because with Neptune too, it's like people with Neptune strong in their chart, you know, a lot of times they're very compassionate to everybody, but a lot of times it's a reflection or a projection of something that they desire for themselves. So just an open invitation, you don't have to know, and just give yourself compassion.
I would say find some experiences that are really beautiful or sublime. Like, see if you can make the ambiance in your room or your house like really magical if you can. Or like get outside and like find like sublime, like just see where the sublime is like available to you and like take that in as emotional nourishment. And also know that if you're porous, you can like set boundaries on like the time that you want to be porous. Like you can tell, if you're creative, you can tell your muses to like let you sleep through the night or something. Like you can play around with how your psychic energy works and not just buy into this belief that it just happens to you and you have no agency or co-creative capacity within it whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, because with Neptune, there is this sort of like this is psychicness, I guess. I don't know the right word. But yes, you absolutely do have agency, and you don't have to let in everything that is trying to come in or that is around you. I would say, yeah, I would say if you're dealing with the intense Neptune transit, especially to a luminary, the sun or the moon, or especially to an angle, look up psychic boundaries. Like look up on YouTube or whatever, talk to an astrologer or a psychic or someone who is sensitive in that way, about how to strengthen your boundaries, or especially psychic boundaries. I wish I had learned this stuff when I was going through Neptune on my ascendant. Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I kind of, when I'm talking to people who are going through a Neptune transit, there is a sense of surrender to it, and knowing that, I always picture like the moon card in the tarot, and kind of being the feeling, I would say, that often comes up with the Neptune transit is just kind of being in the middle of the ocean at night with like, nothing to hold on to, and almost having to go, like, you can't fight the current. um there's a sense of kind of just relaxing, surrendering, and letting yourself flow with it as opposed to fighting it. Can you guys hear me or no? Probably not.
You're cutting out.
It was
Everything
cutting
feels like
out.
it's
Okay.
back now.
All right. Back now. Okay, cool. All right. Let's see. I think we covered Neptune. Do you guys have any final thoughts about Neptune?
Say something, Kirah?
Hey, am I back?
Kind of, sort of.
Kind of,
Little
sort
fog
of.
there.
Wait, I'll wait.
Are you back?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you now. I'm about to run to
Okay.
the bathroom real quick.
Okay, go ahead. We'll take a pause. Okay. Yeah, do you guys have any last thoughts about Neptune? Are you ready to move on to Pluto?
I'm ready
Yeah.
for Pluto.
Okay.
I'm like always ready
Let's
for
do
Pluto.
this.
What do you mean? You could have started with it.
True. I mean,
No,
okay.
Pluto.
How does anyone want to talk about any myths associated with Pluto?
Sabrina, I like listening to her myth stuff.
Same.
I mean, what I know about Hades doesn't really cohere with what I think about Pluto. Because what I understand of Hades, which is actually not that much, to be honest, but from an archetypal psychology class I took, Hades as an archetype is like almost kind of bland and has like little personality, and like there's very few myths, and the only thing he's known for is abducting Persephone. So there is that quality with Pluto. I think that there's like an edge, there's a big edge to Pluto because it relates to power dynamics. So there can be imbalances of power and abuse. But yeah, Hades as an archetype, like the Hades man from like Gods in Every Man, written maybe in like the 80s or something, describes Hades almost as like someone who spends their time in like a den that like the blinds are shut and they're just like solemn and like have little personality. Like that was the understanding that I got of Hades. And I think of Pluto as almost more like there's a Dionysus side to Pluto, I think too, of like yeah. So when I think about myths and Pluto, it's just Pluto. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, the only one I know of is the Persephone myth as well. And yeah, the association with like power dynamics and obsession even. Cam, what do you think?
Yeah, I never really. I get like when I was in college, especially like when I started getting into things like archetypes, I was like in like a really strong like black power like phase. So I just was like, all that Greek shit, hell no. So like I kind of skipped over that, even though I like it now more. But the way that I like receive information, it was like in a non-linear way. It's like, and I kind of, from my perspective, when people talk about myths, I'm like, oh, when they talk about the myths, I'll talk about the glyphs. So I'll do that because it came through me when I was driving on the interstate one time. I like literally almost got in a car accident. But it's like the soul of spirit, the circle of spirit, right? And then how the glyph of Pluto has that receptivity, the symbol of receptivity in the cross of matter. It's like why the circle of spirit even like came into form, right? It's like that energy or that life force in how the earth, the cross of matter, was receptive to it. So it's like deeply like why the energy or the vital force of a person even incarnated into this reality. So it's like they say the soul, but I like to just call it the deep self. It's like why it came back, like the desire, like what drew it back here magnetically. yeah, so that instead of a myth, that's like the way that I look at the glyph to begin with.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I I guess I have a weird relationship with Pluto in terms of like astrology and figuring out how to talk about it, which is weird because I do have like a Sun Pluto conjunction. But I don't know, maybe that's why, maybe it's kind of a blind spot to me, but I definitely see it as this sense of just deep, deep, deep raw power, and also like, yeah, raw resources even. There's this with Pluto, I think of like the god of the underworld, and when I think about what that means, I think of like having control or power through of everything that is unseen, or that is kind of deemed like, yeah, not deemed, but I guess that is not seen in this, like, as Jason Holly would say, like day consciousness sort of world. um there's this there's this association with just power, and what always comes to mind for me with Pluto is the raw resources of the earth and things like metals and um I don't know, other sorts of materials that you get from the earth that are very like coveted and also, hoarded. um I think of everything that kind of just like lies beneath. I also think of like atomic bombs and things that are like so small, as small as like two particles like coming together that can create something that is so ginormous and so I don't know, like life destroying even. um yeah, Pluto has this sense of like all or nothing. And it is like, it's, I don't know, the god of the underworld. I think of it as this very like dark, mysterious, but I don't think dark meaning bad at all. Like, I don't think Pluto's necessarily good or bad, or any of the planets are. But it does have this like just association with this raw, like almost carnal energy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a good point about the atomic thing. And I've heard Chris Brennan say something. I don't know if he said it or somebody else said it, but I always repeat it. And he says it makes small things big and big things small. I really love that because in my work as a medical astrologer, I look at it and I've seen it a lot, like affect people's like endocrine system. And when you think of the endocrine glands, like they're super small, but they affect so much in the body. So it's like that small little, oh, their little pineal gland, right? It like controls like everything, right? It's like, and obviously for people who are like into medical stuff, it doesn't control everything, of course. So I had people like come at me, but yeah, so it's like endocrine glands just control so much, but they're so small. So that's something. And then also, I feel like through like the lens of evolutionary astrology, like people's unconscious desires, like a lot of times I find when I like talk to people about things that are Plutonian, they actually on a subtle level, they know that they want it, but they just don't know how big it is. So it's like, oh yeah, my sibling was a jerk, but then like the dynamics that were involved with them and their sibling actually like permeate their whole reality. So stuff like that is like really, really big. And I also invite people, I don't think we fully know about Pluto always. So it's like always like allowing ourselves to continue to learn about the outer planets, especially Pluto. So yeah, and there's more extreme. It can be very extreme. Like you were saying, like I say, raw power. So it's like if these two atoms come together, they can create world peace because we can run the whole planet with just a little bit of power, or we could destroy the whole fucking thing. Right? It's like that power versus powerlessness energy dynamic when it comes to Pluto is like really potent.
Something that always comes to mind with Pluto um, there's this guy I knew, um, and he was a Scorpio rising, and he had Pluto on his ascendant. And guess what his and Sun in the 8th house in Gemini. And guess what his job was? He was literally a mortician.
I was just thinking something with a graveyard. Yeah.
He was this guy. His name was Ralph. He would come in. He would come hang out with me. He would wear this black trench coat. No joke. Like long black trench coat, long black like handlebar mustache and beard. Short guy too, and he was just he was a mortician, and he would do everything from like taking the bodies, preparing them. He would conduct like the funeral services and the burials. Like he did all of that shit. He had like, and he was so, I don't know, matter of fact about all of it, because like that's just what he does. But to me, he was just like the most Plutonian figure, and that he was just very like, you know, like does his own thing, kind of like he's, you know, a literal mortician, comes in a black trench coat, which is very, very literal. And yeah, when I think of Plutonian people, I think of people who like are pretty aware of the power that they yield in one way or another, and or they become aware of it, especially at a young age. Like for me, having my Sun Mars Pluto conjunction, that definitely played out as a kid a lot, as just like realizing when I was just like too much sometimes, and not even like in a way where I was like loud or, you know, rambunctious or anything. But I just would notice when my presence would really affect people, and even without me doing anything. And that was something that that was that really stuck out to me in my childhood. It's just like how I can just, Plutonian people in general, a lot, especially people with Pluto on the ascendant, or like in the first house, they can be very polarizing without doing anything about it. Like it very much is that magnetic, either people are extremely attracted to you, and not even just sexually, like that's that magnetic pull towards you, or there's a repel, and like they cannot be around you. And I often have to tell people who are very like Plutonian that like it's not necessarily you, like it's people's reactions to you and your power. And that's really scary for some people, to be around someone that, you know, they can viscerally feel their presence and their power. Yeah, do you guys have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think a lot. I love that point too. And just like that made me think of how we're all projectors.
Yeah.
And like that's, projectors have a penetrating aura, and like Pluto is a very penetrating archetype. But
Yes.
I think a lot of like Pluto work, like if you engage Pluto in your chart, like anyone who's listening, it's about becoming really aware of energy exchange, and like what you're giving, what you're providing, what you're exuding in a situation, and what you're receiving, or even unconsciously what you are seeking to extract. So like if you need something so badly that you're willing to use manipulative or coercive tactics to get it, I think that like we can think about like a villain who's like, I know I'm evil, and they're just like plotting their evil. And then you can also think of someone who has like a deep unconscious desire that they haven't owned fully, and they have shame about it, or they want it so bad and they don't know how to deal with it, that they do these like shady or manipulative things to get what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that creates all these cataclysms and blowups. Like reality might support uh, that behavior for a time, but it tends to create like bad karma, or like these difficult situations. And so often I feel like people change or transform because they don't want to be in pain anymore. So it's like having the same crisis come up over and over again, and you finally ask like, what do I have to do with this? Like, what am I doing to like attract this situation? How am I the common denominator in this situation? And that's where like a lot of power is too, of like when we take personally, because this doesn't apply for every situation, taking personally what happens in our lives, but from the plutonic level, like figuring out, yeah, why we're attracting certain things, altering our behavior or our intentions and seeing a different result. And I've heard Pluto be called laser-like free will. Like once you do the deep like shadow work, then you can be really intentional about your will instead of just acting from a place of compulsion.
I love that. Laser like free will. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's, I'm gonna sit with that one.
That was great. Sometimes I need to start talking before Sabrina when I know she's gonna say some really good stuff, because then it's just like completely like I don't know what to say after her. I'm just like, oh, okay. But yeah, I'll think of when it comes to Pluto, because that's, I mean, a lot of times when people get entangled, there's always like power dynamics that need to be like sussed out. So I think about entanglement a lot, and I also think of like Kundalini energy. So when we're talking about like that raw resource again, that Kundalini force, you know, the deep energy that like just moves through not only just our like physical body, but like the subtle channels in our body. Yeah, I just think about that a lot, and I can't even say that I fully can connect the full understanding to astrology with it yet, but I'm working on it. And I also think about Pluto and detoxification and what I like to call Phoenix consciousness. So just the ability to like rebirth and transmute, and just being mindful of transmute is different than transform, whereas like transmute is like a caterpillar to a butterfly. It looks totally different when it's done, right? It's like completely changed forever, and it's not even the same being. Yeah, and there's a lot that I can unpack there, but that's where I'm gonna stop for now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you brought up the whole caterpillar butterfly thing, because that is like the number one metaphor I use with clients when talking about a Pluto transit, and that, you know, when you're in it, you're in it. And I think it was Anne Ortley who said, like, if you were to tell the caterpillar what was going to happen inside the cocoon, they would not want to go into that cocoon. But, you know, when you're in a Pluto transit, and yes, I'm talking to anyone who has a planet at 22 to 23 degrees Capricorn, or I guess you could even say 21 to 23 degrees Capricorn. There's this sense of like, again, I mean, I always say surrender when it comes to outer transits, but you're in the middle of like a huge cellular level transformation. And with Pluto, it really does just kind of dig deep, and it's changing you from the inside out. And at the end, you will be a totally different person or a totally different being. I think like your soul is still there, but there is this sort of major shedding and letting go, and yeah, like stripping away, I think. And then there is this like rebirth or transmutation for sure that comes after that. Yeah, advice for people moving through Pluto transits.
Before I give advice, I would say this makes me think of sexuality too, and like the creativity of the Kundalini and everything you just said. This was like, it just kept bringing it up. It's like, and even I know a lot of people don't like the whole like eighth house sex thing. That's totally fine. I just respect it. But also, you know, I would invite people. It's like, have you ever had an experience that was like so deeply entangled and just powerful that like you merge with that thing through the entanglement and you access deep power, right? Because the eighth house Pluto thing, yeah, it could be powerlessness, but like we were saying before, it's like these two things come together and they could like run the whole planet. It's just like so big, but then it also can be disempowering, right? So yeah, if anybody hasn't they had a Kundalini practice with their partner right before they engaged, like
Wild.
open invitation. The open invitation is just like, know that there are experiences that are further in things that we don't see that are at play, that are potentials and possibilities.
Mm-hmm. I guess, yeah, before we even talk about transits, I think talking about Pluto in the birth chart first, because I think what I see a lot of, especially, is like, I know I have Pluto, I have Venus square Pluto, or Venus opposite Pluto, or Venus conjunct Pluto, and then also with the moon, like moon Pluto aspects, and especially with our generation with Pluto and Scorpio, and therefore, if their Venus is also in Scorpio, it's in detriment. If their moon's also in Scorpio, it's in fall, and there's this like extra sort of like intensity, I'll just use that very blanket term, when it comes to those Pluto aspects. And I don't know, that's something that I see a lot, and it's really, it becomes really difficult for a lot of people to work with. I have Mars Pluto, and I see it playing out very often as like, just like this, I mean, with Mars there is this power, but with Mars Pluto it's like power power to the extreme, and really figuring out how to like wield that power, how to wield that weapon that's like not just like a Mars sword, but it's like dipped in like radioactive juice or some shit, and like really having to be very conscious of that. And I think similarly with like Venus Pluto dynamics, it's like really needing to, I think, be conscious of the power of connection and of like relating with people, and that there is, it's not like necessarily a weapon like with Mars, but there is this like intense magnetic energy that you're working with when you have a Venus Pluto aspect. And I think another thing with Pluto is obsession, and like that compulsion kind of turning into like constantly needing a hit, or needing that feeling of not just connection, but like complete merging. Do you guys have any thoughts about that, and like thoughts around, Pluto aspects in general in the birth chart?
Yeah. I think that anything that Pluto aspects is up for major transformation in the incarnation. And I feel like there's like a yoga or something to each one. And I really like Jeffrey Wolf Green's Pluto book, Volume 1. Like, he just goes through all the different Pluto house placements and all the different Pluto aspects. That was like one of my first resources, as well as just watching like my teachers, like Pluto videos or Pluto audios, and just there's like, so like you can talk for hours about Pluto in the 5th house or something like that. Mm-hmm. So figuring out like, what do they desire the most? What talents do those desires come with? And what are the psychological complexes there? And so they're just so dense. Like, I feel like even if we're talking about like an atomic bomb and how it's like this small thing that creates a huge explosion, it's like Pluto on the chart has like so much that's happening there, even just by like house placement. But I guess like a few examples of like Pluto Mercury, for example, could be like thinking so much that it almost like hurts. Like, you have this super active, like penetrating mind. You like want to get to the bottom of things, and you may have some lessons around communicating in a way that actually gets the results that you want. Like, maybe the way that you communicate with Mercury Pluto, people feel cut by your words, and you're getting this like really negative reflection, and you realize that you had some, your observations with Mercury Pluto can be very penetrating, and you're just casually naming things and someone's like, how did you see that? And they're offended. So figuring out how to use language really pointedly or kind of like powerfully, but in a way that is like wielding the power and not just, I like to think too of like a baby rattlesnake, where a baby rattlesnake, if it bites you, will just give you all of its venom because it doesn't know how to control it yet. So like learning what your power is so that you can wield it. Venus, Pluto, it's like all the stuff around like, the power of love and like wanting love so badly that there's the manipulative sides of it. There's also like the depth of a Venus Pluto person's love transforms the other person. Like a lot of people have, they will be blown away by like being loved that deeply or that loyally, that it's an experience. And then like what else could I say about that? I think I'll just leave it there. See what you guys think.
Yeah. One aspect of Pluto that I really focus on a lot, especially from Jeffrey Wolf Green's book, is the Mars to Pluto aspect. That's one of my favorites. And because in evolutionary astrology, they look at Pluto as the higher octave of Mars too. So it's like connecting the conscious desires, like the desire that someone is instinctually acting out without even maybe having forethought, versus like what's actually going on underneath the surface. So that aspect, especially when it comes to new phase conjunctions, I promote people to go out and just use the Martian energy. Because with the new phase conjunction of Pluto and Mars, it is an instinctual process, and they're trying to learn how to wield their power. But when you are a baby, just like she was saying with the baby rattlesnake, when you are a baby at something, you need to go out and like quote unquote make mistakes before you can learn how to wield that power. And if you don't go out and quote unquote make the mistakes, then that power can get like repressed. And when that power gets repressed, it can get distorted. So it's just like whenever you have the Mars Pluto new phase conjunction, that's really important. And I kind of take that around the wheel and in phases. So that's why I would invite people to do like look where your Pluto is at, look where your Mars is at, and look what phase it's in relation to how you act out things in your life in general versus like what do you actually want underneath the surface. Right, just as an exercise, an open invitation to like tune into that.
I love that. Trying to think of other Pluto things. I feel like Pluto in the 7th house too. It's like you're attracting a lot of Plutonian people in your life, and your relationships will have like a Plutonian vibe. Meaning, I mean, that often looks like, like all or nothing sort of relationships, which is also like a very Venus Pluto thing. And not being able to do casual, which is like a-okay. Anyone out there who who feels like
just
if they can't
podcasted
just
about
date,
it.
yeah. Yes. Yeah, and then like even Pluto in the midheaven is a really interesting one, or even on the North Node, because there is this sense of like being known for being someone that is really powerful, or that has the power to transform. Something that comes to mind, I have a friend whose ex-boyfriend has this like Scorpio stellium he has, at least it was just Pluto North Node midheaven conjunction. And he's this like incredibly talented musician. And there's just like this power to his music, and also just like to his whole vibe. But that made me really, or maybe it was honestly, I think it was his South Node. Yes, it was Pluto conjunct the South Node on the midheaven, which means that he probably had that Saturn there too, because that was like the 84, 85 kids, not kids, they're older than me, but people. And seeing that as like this, to me, I looked at that like, oh, you've been making this music for a long time, like meaning lifetimes, and you're kind of known for bringing this sort of like, just, I guess, intense energy through, through your personal medium, which was like any sort of instrument for him. He was just one of those people who can play anything. um yeah, I guess that's what I wanted to say. It was just like Pluto on these sensitive points tend to point towards like almost like an amplification, or like needing to like get that out into the world, like people being able to like give Pluto, that Plutonian energy, to other people or into the world, or like making it part of your dharma, your path. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, like empowering people.
Yes, duh, yes.
I
Love
love
that.
like there's a lot of like I've noticed that people who have like a command of their energy, like maybe like a yogi or someone who just like has this energy where you can feel like they're just like they're powerful. That thing that you were saying, Kirah, about that visceral presence, but it feels like they've contained it and they're very
Mm-hmm.
masterful of like how they use it. Um, that they often have like these stories of like immense cataclysms and personal trials that they learned from. And I think even like advertising, I've been studying advertising. I talk about
Second
it on
house sun,
Twitter.
no big deal.
Yeah. But I feel like there's this whole structure of like being, understanding people's problems and pain points and being like, hey, like we get this. And like, I went through this same thing and like I had this trial and this personal difficulty, but I found this teaching or this product and it had this transformative result. Um, so I think that a lot of people who have, whatever your Pluto work is, and when you've gotten to a place of success with it, there's often a way that you become a transmission that empowers other people. And you don't even have to talk about the thing, but if you do, like that's just, it makes really powerful like information and teachings.
I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that,
Yeah,
Cam?
definitely 1,000%. Yeah, I think that 1,000%. And I just would piggyback on it and just like always being mindful, because I'm just very aware of like the dichotomy of like people glamorizing Pluto, but then also people being like, Pluto's not it. It's like knowing that, yeah, it's like that's not even a spiritual concept. It's just like when you go through a lot of tough stuff, you can help other people through a lot of tough stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Basically. So true. Well, I think we're getting to a point of, I mean, we've been talking for quite some time. And I could talk to you guys for hours. I mean, the three of us have talked for hours, especially, in that cute little home we stayed in outside of Seattle last year. Can't wait to get together again sometime. But for now, we will start to close out. Where can we find you, Sabrina? Let us know where we can find you if people want to book a reading with you, all that.
Yeah, so you can find me at monarchastrology.com. I have a mailing list. I write weekly forecasts, and I also teach an evolutionary astrology, so Pluto-based astrology intensive. And I haven't announced the dates for the next one, but I will soon. And if you're on my mailing list, that's a great way to find out about it. I have a podcast, Magic of the Spheres. We've had you
Yay.
on, Kirah. We've had Cameron on. And Instagram at Sabrina Monarch and Twitter at Sabrina_Monarch.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and you just also spoke at the Fresh Voices in Astrology Summit. And yeah, you did it was on the lunar nodes, but it was amazing. And yeah, people can find that. Are you going to put that on your website at all?
I think so at some point. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then we'll also have it for sale with like um, the pack of all 12 talks. So that's out there. And you also, don't you have another class too, or another course?
Yeah, it's in session. It's called Online Presence as Performance Art. And it's
Yes.
about re-enchanting the internet and having like working through whatever it is that's holding us back from having a public presence.
That is so
So,
cool.
yeah, I
You're gonna
love
offer
this
that
one.
again sometime?
I think so. Yeah, I'm probably gonna re-record the modules and like offer it as like a course that isn't live, but I'll add in some like extras and stuff. But yeah, the
Awesome.
lectures, they've been really like, we're going deep and I'm having a lot of fun with it.
I'm jealous. I wish I was a part of that. Yes, please offer it again. Because that sounds like such a great course to take. I think a lot of people can get a lot out of that. So thank you. And
Thanks,
Cam,
Kirah.
yeah. Cam, where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at CADream6. You can find me on Twitter at CADream7. And then I also just came out with a Health Secrets of the Zodiac course. And you can find that on astrologyhub.com. And you also can find that like in the links in my bios. And you can also, if you want to book a consultation, you can just email me at cadreamplanet.com. Yeah. Wait, no, cadream@gmail.com. Yeah. I'm going to have that website up though.
Awesome. Thank you. What was I going to say? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's what I was going to say. All of these links will be in the show notes. So, yeah, be sure to check Cam and Sabrina out. And yeah, thank you so much. Thank you both so much for joining me. It was such a pleasure.
Thank
thanks
you,
for having
Kirah.
me.
I'm really excited for this podcast, your new podcast.
Thanks.